caution, which I think is well said in terms of we shouldn't get too carried away here on the ascendant model or where the world's going. And I think you made a very cautionary tale of, we've been there with Japan. I personally was a foreign correspondent in Asia in that ascendant period.
Right.
And,
you remember.
Everybody was talking like we'd all be working for the Japanese, and obviously we know how that played out. So, and also China is facing enormous challenges that just kind of some ways dwarf what we have in the West in terms of poor peasantry and environmental kind of catastrophes of just enormous magnitude. I'm just curious, giving you a little space here to rebalance a little bit of what could also be ahead that might constrain essentially the effectiveness of China and make it so it might balance out in a way that right now it seems not as clear. Any thoughts on that?
We all know really only one thing about economies with any sort of inevitability, and that is they go like this. They're cycles. And there's never been an economy that's just done this forever. And China has been doing this for 20 years, almost unprecedented in history. Not only been going onward and upward, but at a 10% growth rate. And this is not even approachable by anyone else. We'll see about India. So at some point, China's going to hit a bump in the road. It's so closely involved or with the global economy that it's also vulnerable to things outside. It's no longer an autarky, that it just gets to do its own thing and can separate itself from the world. So that's a real danger. And when that happens, because so much of its legitimacy is based on its economic delivery, it could have a real crisis. It doesn't have sort of foundation documents, constitution, it doesn't have a common value system to turn to. It doesn't have sort of civil society that's as evolved as in many Western countries. There are many things it lacks that are safety nets underneath its ability to provide just delivery on the economic side. And then there are many other fault lines and many other weaknesses. The question of environmental damage is profound. Whether they can get on top of that, probably in many ways, I think they can, but it's a huge challenge. The challenge of moving another few 100 million people into cities. You have cities like Chongqing, which are, 32 million people. I mean, it just dwarfs anything that's ever happened anyplace else. To provide 15 million new jobs every year, to keep all of these people on the escalator going up, exceedingly difficult. And then you have a lot of unrest. You have massive corruption, because you have to remember here you have a system where the party controls property, and the party controls the banks. So in order to deal property, there has to be some official who's being paid, maybe $1,000 a month tops. Of course he's going to want to rake off and pay off. And then he's friends with the banks, so you have property and banks coming together, and this is how you get bubbles. So corruption is a problem. Public unrest is a problem. The confiscation of property, because there's no private property. Huge problem. You get a whole village, the guy comes in, and the officials say, sorry guys, we're taking your village. You move someplace, we'll get you nice high rise out in the boondocks. Well, this makes people really angry. So there are all kinds of things like that that are seething beneath the surface and which scare the wits out of the leadership, and we don't hear much about them. And Chinese media doesn't cover them because they don't want the dots connected. But you know that they're scared, because otherwise they wouldn't be so assiduous in their control. To control the media, control the internet, control this. When the Nobel Prize was awarded, they're stopping scores of people from leaving the country at the airport. Why? They just worried they might show up in Oslo. That's a lot of control. So these are problems. one of the main problems is not China. It's us. I mean, we have a Congress that's like one big dumb animal with no central nervous system. It can't seem to do anything. And yet somehow we're supposed to dock with China. We're supposed to form policies that can imagine a new future with China. And we can't even support our own schools. So it's very alarming. China is just churning away over there. And for us to figure out a new angle of repose with them in a bilateral sense on a whole host of issues, we have to have an ability to form policy and, even more important, to implement it. And we seem paralyzed at this moment from being able to do it. So we have a very strange situation of some of the smartest people we've ever had in history in Washington. And they're really hobbled. Very hard for them to act. And another thing, they're broke. So they don't have a lot of money to move around to do much. So they can sign a lot of memoranda of understanding with China, but unless you can put more than $15 million on the table, I mean, you're not in the game.